Several people have made the voyage to this dangerous location to view the most famous of Great Lakes shipwrecks.
What secrets lurk beneath the ocean's depths? Sunken shipwrecks hold far more than treasure. They guard chilling mysteries and tragic tales frozen in time. From a massive head peering from the darkness to ghostly corpses frozen in time, divers have made haunting discoveries in these underwater graves.
Archaeologists studying sea level change have made an incredible discovery at the bottom of the Black Sea.
Ready to uncover the eerie and extraordinary? Join us as we reveal 15 terrifying discoveries found in shipwrecks. Number 15. Medical and personal items on the Mary Rose. Of all the mighty warships that were built during the 1500s, there was one particular warship that was feared for its great size and deadly firepower. This was none other than Mary Rose. Built in the 16th century, this once promising ship was the flagship of King Henry VII. It was a mighty vessel that dominated the seas, striking fear into its enemy and winning several wars against the French.
She was the pride of the fleet, King Henry VIII's flagship. He stood on the ramparts of Southsea Castle.
But in 1545, disaster struck. During a fierce battle with the French, something went terribly wrong, and without warning, the massive ship sank into the bottom of the ocean, taking more than 300 sailors with it. But even to this day, no one knows exactly what caused the ship to sink. Over the years, there have been various speculations and theories about how the ship sank. Some believed that the ship tipped over and sank because of its open gun ports, while others have said that the ship was unstable and carried too much weight. But even after the ship was rediscovered in 1971 and brought back up to the surface in 1982, there hasn't been a clear answer to what happened. As time passed, many of the treasures and artifacts found in the midst of its shipwreck have gone through the process of restoration. In fact, a total of 19,000 artifacts have been found and preserved. This is because many of these artifacts were retrieved from the wooden chests which had held them in the sea for centuries. These chests were very strong and protected the items from other damage. Inside these chests were tools like hammers, drill handles, and rulers, but there were other items such as a backgammon set, plates, a sundial, and a tankard. Apart from this, medical equipment was also found. This included things like a copper syringe that was used to clean wounds and treat sexual diseases.
From the surgeon's chest on the Mary Rose. So I've just tightened him up there.
They even had feeding bottles that were used to feed patients who were too sick to eat. It's also worth noting that the doctors on the ship didn't just perform medical duties. They also carried out tasks that are normally associated with barbers. They had ear scoops, shaving bowls, and knit combs. And surprisingly, some of these combs had actual lice eggs stuck in them. But what was really out of the ordinary that sent chills down the spine of archaeologists was the skeletal remains found on this ship. Many of the sailors who had little or no time to run to safety sadly drowned alongside the ship, and many of their remains were found scattered across the wreckage. Apart from the human remains, several skeletons of animals were also found on the ships. One of the chests held the skeletons of a rat, a frog, and a dog. Another chest had bones of pigs and fish. While skeletons can be a very scary thing to see in shipwrecks, it's actually a normal occurrence, and sometimes they play very important roles in understanding things from the past, just like the one retrieved from this next vessel. Number 14. Human skeleton on Antikythera shipwreck.
Marine archaeologists started exploring a shipwreck at the bottom of the Aegean Sea with a semi-robotic metal diving suit.
The Antikythera shipwreck is one of the most famous, largest, and most puzzling shipwrecks in history. Over the years, several strange findings were made at its location that have amazed experts and the world in general.
Archaeologists studying sea level change have made an incredible discovery at the bottom of the Black Sea.
And just when archaeologists thought that nothing more shocking could be found on this site, something truly terrifying happened in 2016. Archaeologists made a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about the Antikythera shipwreck. And this discovery was the remains of a human skeleton, lost at sea for over 2,000 years. This new find was beyond remarkable, as archaeologists began to question who this person was and how they ended up deep at the bottom of the sea. This discovery was made by a new team of explorers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, who went on archaeological research while diving deep into the Mediterranean Sea. At first, with the amount of great finds and scientific discoveries recovered from this shipwreck, they had little hope of finding anything new. But as they went on through the wreckage just 165 feet below the surface, they came across an object that was buried beneath several boulders, sand, and bits of pottery. When they first saw it, they thought they had found just a regular rock or a thin slab. But when they took a closer inspection, they found out that it was actually a fractured skull. As they continued to dig and explore, they came across even more remains scattered around the area. These remains were a jawbone with 3 teeth still attached to it, 2 arm bones, several pieces of broken rib, and 2 femurs. The bone's condition was said to be incredible. As a matter of fact, the skull pieces looked especially promising for DNA extraction because they contained petrous bone or a pyramid-shaped part of the temporal bone. This will enable scientists to conduct genetic analysis that will inform researchers about what the young man looked like or what part of the world he came from. Some experts believe that this dismantled skeleton was a crew member whom they nicknamed Pamphilus. But how did they come up with such a unique name? Back in 1976, the famous underwater explorer Jacques Cousteau recovered a drinking vessel with the name Pamphilus written across the rim. Being one of the most renowned explorers, Cousteau had discovered some really fascinating vessels. And this Antikythera shipwreck that we are currently looking at is one of his most notable finds after he rediscovered it in the 1970s. As intriguing as this discovery was, it can't be compared to this ancient device that has the ability to display the motion of the universe found in this same vessel. Number 13. Antikythera mechanism.
Ancient Greek computer thing. What is that called?
The Antikythera mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the longest time, one of the most complex and most controversial discoveries that has had archaeologists and scientists in a daze is the Antikythera shipwreck. This device isn't just a piece of metal made from wires and motherboards, but it's a simple-looking yet complex mechanism that scientists are still trying to understand. First retrieved in 1901 by Captain Dimitrios Kontos and a crew of sponge divers from Simi Island, this magnificent piece of metal was found at a depth of 148 feet off Point Glyphadia on the Greek island of Antikythera. But when they found it among several other ancient artifacts and treasures, they didn't pay much attention to it, mostly because they thought it to be a lump of corroded bronze and wood. It went unnoticed for 2 years. But on May 17, 1902, archaeologist Valerios Stais found one of the pieces of rock had a gear wheel embedded in it. This was really an odd find, because no one expects a rock to have gear.
It was not recognized at all as being anything interesting when it was discovered. It was just a corroded lump about the size of a large dictionary.
Upon closer inspection, he was surprised that this wasn't a rock, but a sophisticated mechanism. But how did such a device so advanced in years end up in an ancient shipwreck? It's a question that was quite difficult to understand. The reason why it's so unbelievable is that this device was built over 2,000 years ago, between the 1st and 2nd centuries, when most individuals had little or no idea what a machine was. But knowing the exact use of this mechanism has raised a lot of speculations and theories over the years.
It's a geared, cogged system that allows you to track the passage of time and figure out where you are.
Valerios initially believed that it was an astronomical clock, but most scholars don't agree. They considered the device to be prochronistic because it was too complex to have been constructed during the same period as the other pieces that had been discovered. Even more theories arose, as a German philologist said it was an astronomical calculator. But whatever it is, whether an astronomical clock or a calculator, one thing that is sure is that this mechanism is the world's oldest computer, and it was created to display the motion of the universe. It predicted the movement of the 5 known planets, the phases of the moon, and the solar and lunar eclipses.
The 2,000-year-old Antikythera mechanism is known as the world's oldest computer.
But if you think the Antikythera shipwreck really had some odd and terrifying finds, then you might be surprised that it doesn't hold a candle to one of the most tragic and retold stories of this next vessel. And the creepy things found on this vessel may cause you to view life from a whole different perspective. Number 12. Items found on the Titanic. Nothing is more terrifying than discovering a shipwreck filled with personal items of several people who lost their lives at sea without traces of their bodies. Known to the world as the most tragic and devastating maritime disaster, the RMS Titanic was a vessel lost at sea after meeting an untimely end. Soon, it disappeared into the ocean, forgotten, leaving behind a heavy heart and some unanswered questions about what happened to its wreck. But it wasn't until 1985 that the shipwreck of the Titanic was found, and since then, regular expeditions have taken place as historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts look for clues about the lives of those aboard. And the things they stumbled upon aren't for the faint of hearts. One might think they found skeletons, but surprisingly, no human remains were ever discovered on the ship. That's because they have all been dissolved by the ocean water. What they did find, though, were a variety of strange, creepy, and heartbreaking items. Pairs of shoes that were still intact lay scattered on the ocean floor. Jewelry, reading glasses, and many other artifacts that were found in and around the Titanic. These items are a reminder of the tragedy that took place in 1912.
We have been very fortunate to recover, also inside leather suitcases, paper documents.
But what really creeped the divers out was a doll's head that was hidden in the muck around the Titanic wreck. As adorable as dolls can be, they sometimes can be the creepiest things to come across. Whether hanging from the trees on the visitable island of dolls or just sitting on the seafloor, a doll's head is a scary sight. Speaking of scary sights, one thing that is sure to scare anyone is the graveyard of ships. Number 11. Ghost Fleet of Chuk Lagoon. Right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean lies a place known for its dark history. Under its calm surface is a graveyard of ships that sank during World War II. And years after it became a hub for thrill-seekers and divers, some of the things discovered here will leave you extremely disturbed. During the Second World War, this site was the naval base for the Japanese military. Here they planned and carried out operations from this very location, which was said to be heavily fortified. This place was so feared that it became known as the Gibraltar of the Pacific by Allied forces. As you can imagine, this naval base was a key target for the Allies. With its strategic location and heavy fortifications, it was a major threat to their plans. But despite its strength, the base was eventually attacked and destroyed. The attack, known as Operation Hailstone, was a massive air and naval raid that took place during the morning of February 17, 1944. American forces sank 12 Japanese warships, 32 merchant ships, and destroyed 275 crucial Japanese aircraft. The battle saw devastating losses for the Japanese forces, with over 4,500 casualties. The area quickly became the largest underwater graveyard in the world and gained further recognition as the Ghost Fleet of Truk Lagoon. And today, deep within the clear crystal water are several shipwrecks. But the things that have been discovered among the wreckage are quite unsettling. Gas masks, depth charges, and even human remains have been found scattered among the debris of fighter aircraft, railroad cars, torpedoes, tanks, and more.
Because this is a graveyard playground, and she'd paid good dollars to swim with those bones.
And these artifacts take on a whole darker appearance, because many of these wrecks have become encrusted with different species of coral, which is now home to manta rays, sharks, and sea turtles. Yet, even this natural beauty can't hide some of the horrifying things living in these wreckages. At one point, many human remains were found, but over time, they were removed and ceremonially cremated by the Japanese government. Yet, if one looks well, there are still several skeletal remains that can still be found. But one thing anyone would love to find is a ship filled with treasures. Number 10. Spanish galleon San Jose. For over 3 decades, there has been a rumor for many generations about a legendary Spanish ship that lay hidden deep in the Caribbean Sea, with stories of treasures and wealth beyond what anyone could ever dream of. Many had searched, but none found it. However, something extraordinary happened in 2014. The Colombian government made a shocking announcement that they had finally located the ship, hidden beneath 2,000 feet of water. And this ship was the San Jose. But how did they find it? And what mysterious finds were discovered here after being 300 years underwater? To understand this, let's take a journey back to the 1700s. The San Jose was a 64-gun, 3-masted galleon of the Spanish. It was a mighty ship with mighty firepower. But sadly, during a battle off Baru Island just south of Cartagena, Colombia, it sank, never to be seen again. Or so the world thought. The sunken ship was located at a depth of 600 meters by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in November 2015, and the treasures discovered here are estimated to be about $18 billion. The ship was laden with gold, silver, and emeralds that were certainly one of a kind. The increasing value of this cargo has led to San Jose being called the Holy Grail of shipwrecks. But with such a valuable treasure, many questions arose about who owned it and what should happen to the wreck. Should it be raised from the ocean floor, or should it be left at the bottom of the sea? These questions have caused intense debate in recent years, with different countries and organizations claiming ownership and many arguing about the best course of action. Colombian and Spanish states, which have historical ties to the ship, have staked a claim to it, also coupled with a U.S. salvage company and indigenous groups in South America. The Colombian government argues that it wants to raise the remains of the vessel and put it in a museum. But archaeologists say the wreck should be left where it is, since it was a graveyard for about 600 people who drowned when the ship went down. Till today, this debate is ongoing, with many in support of letting the ship remain protected under the forces of the sea from the greediness of man.
The Colombian president wants to raise all of the ships from the seabed and display their contents in museums.
But here's another legendary discovery, which was a missing piece of a statue built during the 1st century. Number 9. Massive head. Imagine swimming hundreds of feet deep into the sea and discovering a giant head lying at the bottom of a ship's wreckage. This sight will definitely send anyone swimming away. But this actually happened. During archaeological research and further study of the Antikythera shipwreck, Some archaeologists stumbled upon this discovery while investigating the unexplored parts of the shipwreck. The archaeologists moved several large rocks to carry out more research, and they discovered the massive Parian marble head of a bearded male figure. In fact, it is believed that the head may belong to the Hercules of Antikythera, a headless statue that was also discovered at the site in 1900. This statue is now exhibited at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. It's an impressive marble piece that perfectly captures one of the great heroic figures of Greek and Roman mythology. The head is actually very huge. It's twice the size of a normal head. It has a big beard, a very particular face, and short hair. There is no doubt that this is the missing head of Hercules. The sculptured head wasn't the only thing they discovered. They also found the plinth of another marble statue and parts of the ship's equipment.
The fragile bones were transferred to Ziploc bags full of seawater before being brought to the surface.
These discoveries were all made possible by the removal of 3 8.5-ton boulders that had partially covered the wreck at the bottom of the seabed. Apart from this, another eerie discovery was the remains of 2 human teeth. This is a huge discovery because it can help scientists learn more about the people on the ship, like how old they were, where they came from, and even whether they were male or female. They can do this using special techniques like forensic science and carbon dating. This discovery, along with the bronze artifacts and iron nails they found, shows that there are still many amazing archaeological treasures waiting to be discovered in the waters off Greece and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. So, why have there been so many amazing discoveries at the Antikythera shipwreck? It's all thanks to modern technological tools like underwater photography and 3D mapping. These tools have made underwater archaeology more exciting than ever, and the Antikythera wreck is just the starting point. There are many more professional underwater excavations happening right now. In fact, since the 1980s, there's been the discovery of over 700 new shipwrecks. And among these shipwrecks is one found off the coast of Cape Cod with rumors of private treasures. Number 8. Whydah Galley. Many interesting stories of piracy have circulated throughout history, but the story of the Whydah Galley is one that is definitely authentic and very intriguing. Commissioned by Sir Humphrey Maurice in 1715 in London, England, this ship was a slave vessel that was used as a transport system for carrying a variety of goods from different businesses to exchange for delivery, trade, and slaves in West Africa. After traveling down the West African coast, through modern-day Gambia and Senegal, to Nigeria and Benin, she left Africa with an estimate of 500 slaves, gold, including Akan jewelry, and ivory, and then headed to the Caribbean. But then, on the return from her maiden voyage in the Triangle trade, Whydah Galley was captured by the pirate Captain Samuel "Black Sam" Bellamy, beginning a new role in the golden age of piracy. Bellamy sailed Whydah Galley up the coast of colonial America, capturing other ships as he went along. Then tragedy struck. Whydah Galley was caught in a violent storm and wrecked off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Only 2 of Whydah Galley's crew survived, along with 7 others who were captured by Bellamy earlier that day. The ship sank into the bottom of the sea and was lost for over 200 years. It wasn't until 1984 that it was rediscovered, buried under 10 to 50 feet of sand. And what they found was really fascinating. One major find was the ship's bell, inscribed with the words, "The Whydah Galley, 1716. This confirmed that the wreck was indeed Whydah Galley.
From every point of view, not the whole of British history is wrapped up in that one shipwreck,
making it the first authenticated Golden Age pirate shipwreck ever discovered. It's also important to note that they also found treasures valued at $400 million. As exciting as this discovery was, it was also the deathbed for many slaves and crew members. because over the years, several skeletal remains were discovered and are still being discovered. Just when we think that the sea doesn't have more ships, we keep finding more with even more tragic stories, like this next vessel that was lost in Lake Superior. Number 7. SS Kamloops. For 50 years, Kamloops was one of the ghost ships of the Great Lakes that sank without a trace, leaving many people wondering about her disappearance. At 250 feet long, this steel freighter was a relatively small vessel for the Great Lakes in the 1920s. For 3 years, the ship's responsibility was to carry cargo between Montreal, Quebec, and Thunder Bay, Ontario. But unfortunately, during one of its missions, it sank with all hands in Lake Superior, near an island in Michigan called Isle Royale, in December 1927. Despite traces of several decomposed bodies and a letter in a bottle, the ship was never found, leaving families and loved ones worried about the fate of the crew members. However, 50 years down the line, with numerous divers making attempts at finding the SS Kamloops, her wreck was finally discovered northwest of Isle Royale, near what is now known as Kamloops Point. This discovery was made by a group of sports divers carrying out a systematic search for the ship. What surprised them was how incredibly well preserved the wreckage was. But what kept it in such great conditions? It turns out the bacteria that usually destroy old ships can't survive in the deep, cold, fresh water depths. As a result of this, the metal hull and cargo were almost perfectly intact, untouched at the bottom of the frigid lake. The wreck lies in total darkness, only visible when divers shine their lamps on it. It's a pretty scary sight, with only parts of the ship visible at a time. And with its total darkness, one can almost have a heart attack when they stumble on some of the remains of the crew that drowned. It's like they are frozen in time, looking as fresh as the day they drowned. One crewmate in particular never left his post in the belly of the ship. His corpse, known as Old Whitey, floats around the boiler room, where currents from the diver's fins made it seem like the man was following them round the waterlogged space. What's really creepy is that this corpse was nearly 50 years old, but it's barely decomposed. His skin seemed to glow from within, surrounded by the rusted metal boiler room. Apart from this, the SS Kamloops wreck still contains cargo from its last voyage. Old candy lifesavers, toothpaste, wooden barrels, and farming tractors can be found still sitting on the ocean floor. As unbelievable as these discoveries can be, the SS Kamloops wasn't the only ship with such an intriguing find. In fact, this next vessel was filled with more sophisticated things from the Second World War. Number 6. SS Thistlegorm. When explorers talk about treasures found at sea, many people's minds go to gold and coins lost to time.
Than simply a halo of gold dust. It was massively important.
But the treasures found on this ship weren't what anybody bargained for. The SS Thistlegorm was a 126-meter-long freighter carrying military equipment during World War II. Sadly, this vessel didn't live up to its expectations as it was sunk by German bomber aircraft in the Red Sea a year after it was built. Out of sheer curiosity, Jacques Cousteau, who was a well-known explorer, discovered the wreckage in the early 1950s by using information from local fishermen. And the things he found there were quite some odd finds. He raised several items from the wreck, including a motorcycle, the captain's safe, and the ship's bell. Even the discovery piqued the interest of National Geographic, and they took a picture of the ship in the February 1956 edition. However, following Cousteau's visit, the site was soon forgotten, but in the early 1990s, Sharm el-Sheikh began to develop as a diving resort, and today, the wreck attracts many divers because of the amount of cargo that can be seen and explored. and the things found deep beneath these wrecks are numerous. These include boots and motorcycles, trucks, rifles, and Westland Lysander wings, and about 20 Bristol Mercury radial engines. One of the many discoveries is the 2 old steam trains that were being carried on the ship. Off to the port side of the wreck level with the blast area can be found one of the steam locomotives which had been stored as deck cargo, and the other locomotive is off the starboard side. And in 2007, the Times named Thistlegorm as one of the top 10 wreck diving sites in the world. But sadly, the wreck is rapidly disintegrating due to natural rusting. The dive boats that rely on the wreck for their livelihood are also tearing the wreck apart by mooring the boats to weak parts of the wreck, leading to further collapse. Here's another shipwreck with an even more haunting story. Number 5. USS Juno. During the Second World War, the U.S. Navy forbade relatives from serving on the same ship.
At the start of this war, it was the mighty battleships that ruled the waves.
The purpose of this rule was to spare families from losing multiple members in the case of a disaster. But 5 brothers had other ideas. The Sullivan siblings flatly refused to serve in the war unless they were assigned to the same ship. For some reason, the Navy gave in and allowed all 5 brothers to board the warship USS Juno. But then, without warning, the USS Juno got struck by a Japanese torpedo during the Battle of Guadalcanal. And on November 13th, 1942, the ship sank, claiming the lives of over 600 men, including the 5 Sullivan brothers. But surprisingly, more than 100 sailors survived the sinking of Juno. They were left to fend for themselves in the open ocean for 8 days before rescue aircraft arrived. While awaiting rescue, all but 10 died from the harsh weather and shark attacks. Among those lost were the 5 Sullivan brothers. 2 of the brothers apparently survived the sinking, only to die in the water. 2 presumably went down with the ship. Some reports believe the 5th brother also survived the sinking, but disappeared during the first night when he left a raft and got into the water. And for 76 years, the location of the ship remained a mystery. But then, in 2018, a breakthrough came when a research team detected something unusual using sonar pulses. As they took a closer look, they were shocked to discover that it was a long-lost warship. It was found near the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific Ocean. The shipwreck rests at a depth of almost 4,000 feet below the surface and can only be described as a crumbling ruin covered in sea life. Many archaeologists who carried out research were concerned about high-voltage electronics that are quite unpredictable, especially those being exposed to the ocean floor. Apart from this, many of the torpedo launchers are still very active, and any sudden movement can set them off. And this could be quite disastrous, as seen by the ruins of this next vessel, and can only be described as a crumbling ruin covered in sea life. Many archaeologists who carried out research were concerned about high-voltage electronics that are quite unpredictable, especially those being exposed to the ocean floor. Apart from this, many of the torpedo launchers are still very active, and any sudden movement can set them off. And this could be quite disastrous, as seen by the ruins of this next vessel. Number 4. MV Salem Express. Far beneath the calm surface of the Red Sea lies a shipwreck that is now a burial site for about 500 people. And what makes this discovery very sad is that this ship was not a warship or a cargo vessel. It was a passenger ship carrying innocent men, women, and children to their doom. And today, many of their skeletal remains can be found deep in its waters. Salem Express was a roll-on or roll-off passenger ferry that operated for 25 years.
Do you remember the day when the Salem Express sank and what happened?
During its active years, it had many different owners, names, and regular routes as it transported civilians from one destination to the other. But in December 1991, the ship was about an hour away from the Safaga port when it crashed into a reef on the Egyptian coast. The ferry started sinking in a matter of minutes, killing approximately 500 people. The disaster sparked controversy over the number of lost lives. Officials reported that there were 690 people on board and only 180 were saved. Today, the Salem Express is a popular diving destination because of its surprisingly well-preserved state. Divies can still see the remains of luggage, including toys, clothes, and automobiles. Some people have also reported hearing sounds of children laughing and car engines roaring. However, choosing to dive at the site remains controversial in diving communities. Due to the heavy loss of life, the tragedy is still fresh in many people's minds, and the fact that some bodies were never recovered makes it a difficult place to visit. Many local dive guides are hesitant to take people there, and those who do often report feeling a sense of unease. But not many people view the Salem Express with the same regard. For some, it's just another wreck to explore, almost similar to visiting a historic battlefield or any other ship that met a tragic end. Even though some parts of the ship were sealed off, there were still many ways to get inside, and because it sank recently, the ship is still in pretty good shape, with coral and other marine life starting to grow on it. Sometimes archaeological sites and shipwrecks can be found by mistake, but what happens when one stumbles on not one, two, but hundreds of shipwrecks? Number 3. Gulf of Mexico. While testing underwater drone equipment in the Gulf of Mexico, a team from NOAA, which stands for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, stumbled upon something incredible. Deep within its water of depth, to over 9,000 feet, they came across over 600 shipwrecks and possible shipwrecks. This groundbreaking discovery was out of this world. What started as a scientific study on oil spills soon led to the discovery of these ships. As researchers went deeper, they realized that 33 of these ships were in fact historic vessels that had been lying undisturbed for centuries.
When the ocean caught fire in the Gulf of Mexico just west of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Some of these ships date back to 500 years, from the time of the 16th century, Spanish explorers to the American Civil War, and through the World War II era. But these wrecks are more than just relics of the past. They've also become artificial reefs, providing a home for all sorts of fish, coral, and other deep-sea creatures. Number 2. Letters from 1941. One thing for a fact that we all know is that paper and water don't mix well together. That's why, when hundreds of letters were recovered from a wrecked ship still intact, it really took archaeologists by surprise. The letters were part of a cargo of 717 undelivered mail bags on the SS Grasshopper, a ship headed to the US that met a tragic fate. On February 16, 1941, a German U-boat torpedoed the ship off the coast of Ireland, resulting in the loss of 80 lives, with only one crew member surviving. But after being lost at sea for over 70 years, the SS Grasshopper was finally found in 2011, nearly 3 miles deep. Along with the letters, the company also recovered more than 100 tons of silver from the wreck, which stayed mostly intact because it had been sealed within the hold, under tons of mail bags, while a handful of the more complete letters from the ship were displayed in an exhibition at the Postal Museum in London in 2018. The museum's archive team has been working on some of the more damaged letters.
Tons of silver from a World War II shipwreck in the Atlantic.
They've been trying to piece together fragments of the letters to reveal glimpses of wartime lives. And one of the famous letters was one written to a woman named Iris, but was never delivered. The letter has been painstakingly pieced together by experts 80 years after it was posted. But sadly, wars can be very brutal, with many losing their life at sea. Number 1. Civil War submarine. Among the several submarines created during the American Civil War, the H.L. Hunley was the first combat submarine to sink a warship. Commissioned by the Confederate States of America, the H.L. Hunley was a hand-crank submarine with a cylindrical iron hull that was around 40 feet long. The way this submarine worked was that it was powered by turning a hand crank, which then turned the crankshaft, propelling the vessel through the water. However, in February 17, 1864, during an attack on the United States Navy Housatonic, Hunley did not survive and sank, taking all 8 members of the third crew, and was lost. Then, in 2000, archaeologists discovered the wreckage with the remains of its crew still intact. From closer inspection, they realized that the crew members showed no signs of panic or desperate attempts to escape the submarine.
I'm next to the historic Hunley submarine. I'm joined by Kellen Butler.
Since the bodies decomposed more than a century ago, any flesh or tissue wounds the crew may have experienced that night will never be known. Today, the Hunley is on display at the Warren Lash Conservation Center. The center includes artifacts recovered from inside Hunley and exhibits about the submarine. Among the artifacts was a $20 gold piece given to one of the crew members, a diamond jewel, and what appeared to be a silver and antler pocket knife. Also, a signal light, binoculars, and 16 shoes belonging to the 8 men were found. Discoveries at sea have really brought out some amazing things, especially ones with cauldrons and marbles. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.